Alrighty, y'all. Hello and welcome to another fun video. We're taking a look at no stupid questions. All right, this forum. The world has questions for Americans, specifically those who reside here in the United States. And we're going to be taking a look at some interesting questions about society here, life here, that kind of stuff. And then we'll also do the inverse a little bit towards the end, looking at some questions Americans have for, well, you guys. There's some good ones in here. Let's get to the bottom of some of these answers. Let's go. So first up, why do Americans remove the U after the O from words like color, but not from words like thought or mysterious? So this one's actually pretty interesting. I've always thought that's weird. Color, labor, humor, all these different words. I've always thought it's kind of funny, and I don't mind either way. I realize that we spell it like C-O-L-O-R, so that's, of course, how I would write it, because I'm used to that, and that's how I was taught. At the same time, I don't mind it even seeing it like this. I think this looks just as proper, and of course, I know in my head this is proper, and technically the way we do it is modified and not original, you could say. But to answer this question, I have no idea. We'll get to the answers down here in a second, but I do think it's odd. Basically, more proof that English is a very kind of versatile language, like most languages are, in the sense that depending on where the English is spoken and taught, it can be, modified in many different ways, especially here in the U.S., right? Our version of English is just, well, bizarre and probably technically wrong on many levels. This is proof of that. Color, we remove the U, but then thought, mysterious, we don't. Because Merriam and Webster decided that when they were going to write the American dictionary, they'd apply their own attempts at spelling reform to make the word spell a little closer to their sound. And while these two people eventually merged their dictionaries to become the Merriam-Webster American Dictionary, their impact of reforming the American English language lives on today. This is kind of interesting. Okay. They're not the only ones that tried to reform English over the years, but they're the ones for the color instead of color spelling. Interesting. Someone also adds that those aren't the only reforms they tried, those are just the ones that stuck. Machine was proposed to be spelled as machine. Okay. That's crazy, right? Even though I get that machine sounds like this right here, like the way this is spelled, that doesn't look right? That looks goofy. This looks correct, which looks weird to us, but makes perfect phonetic sense. That failed to stick and got relegated to the dustbin of history. I'll say this about English that's kind of odd as well. Obviously, it's easy to me because it's what I've been taught and spoken my whole life. But when I've looked at other languages, pretty much when it comes to anything, when it comes to, like, for example, Slavic languages, like I've looked at Czech on and off for a while. I've of course learned a lot of Spanish over the years. I've learned a little bit of French, right? These things, a lot of these languages are more phonetic. They're phonetically consistent. And so it makes sense. When you see a letter, it's pretty much always going to be pronounced the same way. Whereas in English is weird. I'm thinking from the outside. Like if you don't know English and you're trying to learn it, machine, that doesn't look, it looks right because I know that's how it's spelled, but technically it kind of doesn't look correct. This looks correct if we're talking phonetics. Yeah, that's why English is kind of tough, because it sounds like this, but in reality, it's actually spelled like this. That's a good example. But anyway, I did not know the origin. People kind of add the whole, like, there were, at one time it was spelled both ways, but the way that was in the dictionary stuck. So yeah, there you go. That's kind of actually, I would say, a pretty accurate, more documented answer on why we spell some of those words differently here in the U.S. I think that's really interesting, and I have actually never heard of that origin story on why we spell it different. I figured it was just because we do things differently here, even when it comes to the whole rejecting metric and stuff like that. Now, this next one is actually kind of interesting, something I've never connected the dots with, but what I've seen separate topics. So this one is, why are Europeans generally more lax about nudity than North Americans, but their public bathrooms are way more private? So remember, here in the U.S., I might show some pictures. Like the stalls in a typical bathroom in European countries is awesome, right? It's like full coverage, very private, as you would expect. And it's how it should be. And here in the U.S., it is, well, I think almost frightening. A lot of people, myself included, purposely just try to, as much as they can, they try to avoid going, using the restroom in public because it's so not private, right? I mean, there's always the concern of if it's going to be clean, for one. But even if you get past that, it's just not private, right? The stalls are very high up. There's big gaps. There's gaps in between the door and the stall. It's just a nightmare, right? There's just way too much exposure, I feel like. But at the same time, nudity and big time censorship with that kind of theme is huge here. Nudity and that type of thing is not very popular, not very welcome here in the US, whereas it is in a lot of different countries, more so than here. So I'll admit that is a little bit of an odd kind of divide there. Let's see what the comments say. Speaking as a Dutch guy, I think it's more so that we are quite private about pooing and peeing over nudity in general. This kind of makes sense. Showering, for example, is no big deal for many people. I know people that grew up with all parents and siblings just walking in on each other while showering to ask each other things. As soon as bodily fluids and stuff are involved, however, we do get private. I should say there's definitely less stigma for men when it comes to peeing. They still will refrain about showing their privates, of course. So yeah, you will find urinals in bigger cities where people's faces will be visible. Yeah, because we hear about, people showering. We hear about like sauna culture in like Northern Europe, and people just are in there naked all the time, right? It's not like a big deal, whereas that is more of a big deal. People try to be extra private when it comes to that stuff here in the U.S. Let's be real. This comment tells it like it is. Straight to the point, though. Choosing to be topless on a beach or whatever is very different than being forced to shit in public. Most people wouldn't even shit in front of their own partner. There you go. Bravo. This next one is very fascinating, and I wish I knew the answer. I brought this point up many times organically in other videos. We have 350 million people here. I don't know why people don't kind of stand up more, so to say. This one has to do with why haven't American farmers protested like European farmers? And boy, have I learned over the years, Europeans can really get up, rise up, and stand up to BS, right? And European farmers especially, right? We've seen what they can do. I think it's impressive. And America just seems to get stepped on left and right. And no one does anything about it, right? It's very bizarre. It goes against what people seem to like boast about. I don't know. I keep hearing about how these American farms are collapsing due to terrible foreign trade policy. Why are they not in mass traveling to D.C. and their state capitals to protest together? Great freaking question. Great question. It worked really well for France and other European countries, so why is it not happening here? I thought Americans were seen and known as tough and rugged, especially folks from the agricultural sector. They literally nailed this on the head. I couldn't have said it better myself. But here is some of the answers. They don't want to lose their subsidies. Bingo. It's always the money game here in the U.S., isn't it? My wife's parents grew up in a small Kansas farming town, and we read that papers that they still get from there. Whenever a farm is being sold in a classified section, not only do they list price and acres, but they list how much of the federal government sends you every month. Bingo. It's definitely a big part of it. Sounds like socialism, if you ask me. Yes. Welcome to the U.S., where a lot of American patriots love to smash socialism and any, program or government-assisted, whatever. But if you really peel back some layers, we have a lot of socialistic things going on here in the U.S. Just seems like a lot of them don't benefit regular people. Hey, we already pay a lot of taxes, but paying taxes and having, good health care that wouldn't ever bankrupt you? No, we can't have that. American farmers, for the most part, are conservative. They have been conditioned over years to see any collective movement as socialist communist. There was no secret made that Trump was going to start a trade war, so they got what they voted for. Their farms will be okay. It's just that they will be now owned by a giant corporation rather than a family. They might not, or they might even be allowed to rent the land off the new corporation and scrape a meager living. Yeah, it is really a shame, man. It's really a shit show here in modern U.S., right? So many farms and farmland is just going to foreign countries. It's going to big corporations. The whole family farm thing is dwindling fast. Perhaps another time I can find an actual graph, but like here, where I live in like Illinois, Iowa, these areas, right, used to be almost all like family farms. And I saw something a while back where, that map looks a lot different nowadays. It's kind of freaky how much of it is corporate now. It just really is a shame that people can't rise up and demand better, right? Now, this one is hilarious because I've heard this said the correct way. I've also heard this said not the correct way, the wrong way. And I've usually heard it said the wrong way 8 out of 10 times, right? Only like 2 out of 10 people get this right, at least here in the U.S. And this is actually the saying, why do Americans butcher the saying, I couldn't care less? Okay, so the proper way to say that would be, I couldn't care less. But yet, if you see here, many Americans say, I could care less. Now, I've always said this the correct way, thankfully, right? It doesn't take too much critical thinking to say this correctly. But unfortunately, I've heard a lot of people say, I could care less. It's funny because that actually implies they care a little bit. That defeats the point of saying it. I like to see the answers. First answer is we do. I was always taught I couldn't care less, and I'm American. And of course, some people do say it correctly, as I said, right? But I've heard a lot of people say it the wrong way. And it is funny when they're like, I could care less, like acting like they don't care at all. It's like, if you could care less, why don't you? It's funny. This comment actually shows that there's no agreement between linguists on why the idiom changed. Modern linguists consider both forms to be correct. I mean, that's fine if that's true. I don't personally consider both forms correct. I think it's very simple. I couldn't care less. That should be the only way to say it, because that is the only way that makes sense. But Merriam-Webster, I guess, is the people that says it can be both ways. Judging from the earlier post, I don't know if they should, they're kind of like changing the rules a lot. It's like, why are they the voice on this? Why are HOAs a normal thing in America? I wouldn't say they're normal, right? I think that's a preconceived assumption that's not very correct. They're common, especially compared to other countries, right? There's many places that don't. I've never ever lived in one, ever. I've lived in many different places. I've never lived in an HOA. I've lived in neighborhoods that were next to one. So like you might live in a neighborhood around an HOA, like an HOA is in that neighborhood and your neighborhood doesn't have one. So like I know they're around, but you can kind of avoid them if you're careful about where you choose to live. This next one I thought is pretty funny because it definitely applies to me. That's right, I'm pointing at my hat. I've always been someone that loves hats. You got to understand, for me, I grew up with baseball as my favorite sport. Baseball, obviously, very associated with hats. This is literally a baseball hat. Chicago White Sox, a professional team near here, right? And it's just something that's always been familiar, right? And I wore it for sports, and I ended up wearing it a lot elsewhere. But let's get to the question. The question is, why are so many Americans terrified of being hatless? I don't think we're terrified of being hatless. It's just something we're used to. I'll point to it like this. First of all, as always, there's people that wear hats in any country. That should be known. And there's also many Americans that never wear hats. But I will say, yes, a lot of Americans do wear hats, and I think that we treat it the same. We treat it as basically a piece of clothing. It's part of our outfit, you could say, right? For me, I like my different hats. I have a lot of them, and I wear them in my videos just because it's kind of like my brand. For lack of a better term, I don't even like that, my brand, but like it's like how I look, right? Like this is authentic Ian. Like I've always wear hats off camera, so why not wear them on camera, And basically what I meant by an outfit is people don't, most people don't walk outside, go into the store or go into their job with no pants on, right? No shirt on. So they have pants, they have shoes, they have a shirt, and it just so happens that Americans tend to have this as part of their outfit. So I'm wearing a shirt, I'm wearing a hat. Like they're kind of the same. They're all part of the look. They're all part of an outfit. That's the best way I can explain it. I think it also has to do with sports. Like I know every country has sports, but I think sports just have a very cult like following here. Like people really get into their teams and stuff, and this is just very easy merchandise grab. Like teams crank out merchandise. Hats are one of the cheapest actually things you can buy. If you want a football jersey, it's like $150 or $200, but if you want a hat of your favorite team, now we're talking like $20 to $30. It's just easier for people. I also think that Edwin sums it up perfectly here. As someone who lived in Dublin, Ireland, and Orlando, Florida, I can answer this one. You get used to it. It's a habit. No hidden meaning behind it. It's just a habit. Why is the American lean a thing? This is hilarious. I don't know. I actually don't know. But it is. I admit this would be an easy way to spot an American because I feel like we do this. I've caught other people doing this here in the States. And I'm just thinking, like, why do we do that? Right? It's not like a big deal, but it's something that we seem to do more than anyone else. For those of you who don't know, apparently Americans have a huge tendency to lean against things like walls, columns, counters when they're standing or shift most of the weight to one leg. If you're talking outside, someone will usually lean on a truck or a car, or they'll lean on a light pole or anything, you know what I mean? I'm just curious as to why this is an American-specific thing. Also, how does everyone else just stand there with all their weight on both feet? Doesn't that hurt? You guys just stand straight up on both feet like a soldier. Well, that's a good question. I feel like it's not that hard to stand. It could be a lot of effort standing in place, almost soldier-like, for a long time. I don't know. I will say it is kind of odd that no one does the lean thing like we do. I don't know why it's an American thing, but I'm American and I lean on things because I feel uncomfortable and awkward all the time, and having a third point of grounding 2 feet plus shoulder or back is more comfortable. I will partially agree. I am definitely capable of standing normal, and I try to consciously stand normal more often than not. But subconsciously, if I'm not paying attention, I will probably lean on stuff. It's just, I don't know why we're conditioned to do that here. This is a good point as well. I don't know if it's an American thing, but I often feel awkward just standing there. Leaning against something makes me feel less awkward, I guess. I don't know. It's kind of like asking, why do Slavs squat? It's just what we do, I guess. I actually have to learn about certain tics like that other people have. I have heard that one. That one must be famous. Right there. My back is sore from carrying the company. That is the answer that we were looking for. This in America. This is accurate. Do most Americans really dry their clothes in dryers? Yes. This one is really good. It's something we brought up as well. And I think it's so funny, right? It just shows, again, the whole kind of government restraint, corruption, follow the money, this type of stuff. That's very annoying and holds back the U.S. in a lot of different industries. This one is pretty good. America is smaller than China, and China has a train system that covers nearly the whole country. Why can't the U.S. do it? Because you hear a lot of U.S. people say, well, it's just too damn big. We can't have, bullet trains and fast trains and great transit here. I mean, it's just too big. That's not an excuse. Europe is really big as well. They have a lot of countries that are all connected. China, right here, right? Great example. Bigger than the U.S. They have, a train system. They can get people around. We just can't do it here. Interesting. And this person kind of explains it. They kind of hit the nail on the head here. 1, population density, which equals demand. 2, lack of supporting public transportation in most U.S. cities outside of the East Coast Metroplex. Yeah, I mean, remember, some cities have decent public transportation. Maybe we're talking about, cities in Jersey and New York City. Even over here in the Midwest, Chicago is known for decent public transportation. But again, that's it. The rest of the country, you're screwed. Car ownership, not just by family, but by nearly every adult in most of the country. Remember, here in the U.S., there's roads and highways everywhere, and it's very normal for each person to have their own car, even teenagers, right? Mom has a car, dad has a car, the teenager has a car, the other teenager's getting a car next year, right? It's very normal to have 3 or 4 cars per household, some 5 or 6. Like, this is normal in the U.S. So if you got the cars, there you go. There's your answer, right? It's just what people get used to and what they depend on. But to expand on this, more than 50% of the U.S. lives in urban areas. Had those areas been planned and built around rail transit rather than automobiles, it would not be like this. This was designed to be the way it is. And they point out, some people trying to correct them, that thank you for taking time to reinforce the fact that rail infrastructure in older cities that used to have public transportation going back, 80 years or so, it was torn out to make room for cars. How many things have been torn out? Public spaces, public transportation, all these things have been torn out and made into one car-centric city. That's the story of the U.S. over the last, 80 years. And someone adds that, yes, we did used to have a lot of streetcar systems that were torn out because of lobbying from the auto industry. How many things in this country would be better and more productive if we didn't have lobbying from big corrupt companies? All right, to finish it off, we have a couple questions going out to other countries. All right, this one's pretty fun. So, American cops are stereotyped as loving donuts. Do any other countries have a different cliche cop food? I thought this was pretty funny, and let's see some of the answers. Now, of course, this would be a great video for comments, so please, if you want to answer any of these yourself, I'm all ears. Policemen in Mexico love everything that has a vitamin T. Tacos, tortas, tamales. You know what? I don't blame them. Those are all great foods, and, you know, I haven't had tamales in about a month or so. I could go for some. Mexican tamales, especially. Tamales con pollo y rojo, right? That's what I'm about. Guatemalan tamales, I'm not as big of a fan of. My wife loves those, though, so she can have those. We don't have cop food, as in the ones like they're eating donuts, but Indonesia has a stereotype of undercover cops selling bakso, meatballs, on a cart to spy certain places or people. There are memes of bakso cart vendors with walkie-talkies, or how they always appear close to protests where there used to be no bakso vendors before. That's pretty funny. In Brazil, it's cojina. I'm probably saying that wrong. I apologize. A savory and crusty fried dough snack stuffed with seasoned pulled chicken. That sounds really freaking good. I want to try that. The cliche in Denmark is a lemon half mooncake from Dan Cake. Add an image. Let's see. Ooh, this is kind of cool. There it is. Any Danish Dan Cake lovers out there, tell me what this is like. This is kind of cool. Looks like it'd be yummy. Italian carabinieri love pizza. There you go. I wouldn't have guessed. And finally, shawarma and gas station coffee in Romania. That's awesome. Actually, one more. In Poland, we joke that if you see the police eating at a kebab place, then you know it's a good one. Very nice. Let's see. Are we going to end it there? No, we will do one more. Let's see. Why is Norway like that? Me and my girlfriend, both American, just did a trip to Europe, but we spent some time in Norway and Denmark, and I was shocked by the contrast. The Danish were so cheerful, outgoing, and friendly. Lots of cafes, restaurants, bars, and all in all, things were lively. Norway was so quiet, and the Norwegians were so reserved. No smiles, no laughter. Sidelong glances kept us whispering in public spaces, and the restrictive liquor laws caught me off guard. I come from Utah, Mormon country, and I'm used to a religiously repressed culture and religious oppression extending to laws and legislature, which is a lot to say. It takes a lot to rattle me. The fjords and nature were breathtaking, but it was damn near impossible to get a buzz on, and I felt like any form of cheer wasn't really welcome. Why is this? Great question. I wouldn't know. I'm not from Norway. Let's see. It's not like Norwegians are the exception here. It's the Danes. Other Nordic people like Swedes, Norwegians, and Finns are more reserved, perhaps due to harsher climate. Danes are known to be the Italians of the Nordics, so more social and open than the rest of the bunch. So that's pretty interesting. This is the thing I kind of like here. I wouldn't have known that. I've kind of heard the Nordics typically are a little more reserved, a little more quiet, right? Not into, a lot of small talk and stuff. I didn't know Danes were a lot more kind of wild and eccentric. That's kind of cool to hear. A Swede once told me that after the trauma of learning to speak Finnish as children, the Finns don't have much to say. And this is why Europe is interesting because, every country you go to, even regions within those countries, but of course, every country you go to, the culture can change quite a lot, even in, a relatively short distance. And I think that's super, super fun. It's fun to learn about. It's interesting. It's why I am so interested and fascinated by Europe and a lot of other places. I think it's great, learning from each other and learning what, each of us is about. I hope you enjoyed this. I think this was pretty fun, and I appreciate you watching. I can't wait to see the comments on this one. I hope to see you in the next video. That's it. My name is Ian. You're watching IWrocker. Until next time, y'all. Catch you later.